Good afternoon and welcome to today's webcast titled Ethical Decision Making. We're glad you have joined us for this Chartered Banker Institute production. My name is Nicholas Boyle, Academic Associate at the Chartered Banker Institute and Director of Storm 7 Coaching, and we're delighted to share our Leadership for All series. It's time to rethink what leadership means. Historically, the perception of leadership is that it only applies to a few individuals with seniority status within an organisation. The role of said leader was to provide guidance and direction to a team. Many conversations have centred around leadership styles and how leaders can lead effectively. In our Leadership for All series, our range of podcasts, webcasts and blogs, we will explore how everyone can adopt key aspects of leadership within their roles daily, without necessarily being a leader. We have already completed a series of 4 blogs, followed up by 4 podcasts on the topics: ethical decision making, the impact of AI, making sustainable choices, and vulnerable customers. And now we have the 4 webcasts planned in the diary over the coming weeks, with this being the first covering the topic of ethical decision making. Today's session should last around an hour, and during the live webcast you may ask questions of our panellists, and I would ask you to do so via the Q&A function. Please note that this webcast is also being recorded and will be available to view on demand shortly afterwards. I'm delighted now to introduce our panellists. So our first panellist is Ed Juno. Ed has over 8 years of experience in the financial services industry, bridging the gap between treasury and financial reporting. Ed's passionate about public speaking and teaching and considers lecturing his way of giving back to the next generation of finance professionals. Currently working with Asia School of Business and completing an MBA, so a very, very busy person. Welcome, Ed.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction, Nick. Hi, everyone, and I hope you guys will learn a lot on this panel session.
Thanks, Ed. Second up, we have Karen Greenell, Head of Performance and Development at the Aldermore Group. Karen's career has been centred in financial services and working in commercial and retail area. Karen's a change and culture leader, as well as being a professional executive coach. Welcome, Karen.
Hello, everybody. Really looking forward to the conversation today.
Fantastic. Good to see you. And last but not least, Alex Borland, Relationship Director at the Royal Bank of Scotland. Alex has worked in the front line with customers all of his career, is a fully qualified chartered banker, and recently also qualified as a green and sustainable professional. Welcome, Alex.
Good to be here. Thank you.
So what we're going to do to start with is just run a short poll, just to see your level of understanding of ethical decision making before we go into the main question and answers. So how would you describe your understanding of ethical decision making? Great. And there we have the answers to the first and the second one. So we would say that somewhat familiar being the biggest chunk there. So between somewhat familiar and would like to learn more is about 90% or so. I'm not sure how those numbers add up quite, but maybe we're almost there. So that sounds good. Okay, great. So a lot of people kind of in the middle would like to know more, have some good sound understanding of it, which I think is great, because in a banking environment that would make sense that we do, and I think it's good that we start off in that position. So I'm going to ask a nice easy question of all the panelists. They're all going to respond to this before we get into some individual questions. So starting off with Alex, can you tell us what ethical decision making means to you, Alex?
Yeah, so for me, simply put, it's all about doing the right thing, Nick. It's as simple as that. Doing the right thing for the customer, the individual, the organisation you work for, and yourself. Applying it day to day is all about, for me, setting the example, setting the tone, making a decision that you're able to stand against effectively, that it's not going to come back and haunt you, and that is all about doing the right thing for the customer and all the other various facets that I mentioned. But again, thinking about it from the banking context, when we have our various codes of conduct, etc., behavioural aspects, having an ethical standpoint is you're benchmarking against all the other facets, for example, trust, integrity, fairness, etc. So for me, in simple terms, it's about doing the right thing.
And Alex, you're obviously dealing with business and commercial customers every day. So does that factor into mainly your credit or your general conversations with them? Is it do you bring this to life every day, every conversation you have?
Yeah, absolutely. Because in the job that I've got, or the role that I've got in the bank, you're speaking to various different people, various different businesses day to day. So the right thing to do is to share that experience and best practice to not only help yourself in your own knowledge, but to help others improve what they're doing. And the only way to do that is to share that type of scenario. And from an ethical point of view, again, it's the right thing to do to share best practice and discuss those types of things on a day-to-day basis where you possibly can.
Excellent, thanks, Alex. And same question to you, Ed. Can you tell us, what ethical decision making means to you?
Yeah, so I totally agree with Alex on really doing the right thing. However, before I say how it means to me, maybe I can define a little how I define ethical decision making, right? So I look into it as a difficult, thoughtful process where I try to combine either ethics, legality, and economics, and that type of framework makes the whole decision making difficult because coming from the bank. When I deal transactions with my customers, first of all, I check regulations for everyone. And next is does the deal make sense to me? I mean, does it make profit? But the challenge is, how much profit can a banker take, right? Sometimes I ask myself whether, am I working for the bank or am I working for the client? In which Alex pointed out that you are working to your customers, right? And it means so much to me because as a middle manager, I want to build my career, build that goodwill and credibility to both customers and to whoever I'm working with, and that foundation is to this thoughtful, ethical decision-making process.
Really glad you mentioned that, Ed, because I was doing some work with some chartered banker candidates recently. And during that work, we focused quite heavily on some ethical decision-making models and tools that help them with those decisions. And one of the things that keeps coming up is when people do look at these, they look at it from a bank perspective, they look at it from a credit perspective, or from a product perspective. But rarely do people answer the model based on what a customer might think. And I think that's a really important part to bring out, because if we want to be truly leaders in customer relations and servicing, then I think that's a view that we should always try and take, and at least very much look at. So no, really thank you, Ed, for that. That's great. And Karen, same to you. Can you tell us what ethical decision making means to you?
Yeah, I think I'd like to sum it up by two words, and curiosity and choice really spring to mind with me. I think the more curious we are, we can take a situation and explore those possibilities and analyse them. And I think about my young niece, who is always asking questions, and how often do we do that when we're making decisions, and really be curious about what it is that we're trying to make. And then the final part of it is actually we then choose what action we need to take on the back of understanding what the actual situation is, the possibilities, and then make that choice. So 2 words: curiosity and choice.
Excellent. So a really thoughtful process where actually we take some time to consider the facts, we consider the realities of the scenario. So we ask the questions we need to ask to make sure we fully understand it. And then we think about the right choice and result and answer based on what we've found. And I think, see, that's the key for me to ethical decision making. Has been summed up really well there by you all, because it is about that questioning technique and getting ourselves into a place where we know we're making the right decision. And I think that's great. So thank you for that. Brilliant. First question, really, we've got some individual questions for the panelists, and the first one I'm going to ask is for Alex. So Alex, having recently passed the Institute's certificate in green and sustainable finance, and given the kind of proximity to COP26, obviously you're in Glasgow, it was in Glasgow as well, the bank's desire to, or banks generally, not just your bank, but banks generally have a real strong desire to support sustainability. How does this impact ethical decision making when you're looking at the green and sustainable finance?
Yeah, so for me, I mean, COP26 being hosted in Glasgow and having sat the exam with the Institute in recent months has been an absolute, godsend in terms of being a timely topic and a timely time to discuss all things sustainable, climate, carbon footprint, etc. So it's been the perfect opportunity in respect of the focus that subject matter is getting to have those discussions with peers, intermediaries, customers. It's opened up that whole discussion. It's accelerated a lot of customer decisions, strategies and investment decisions about how they are shaping their business. But for me, there's still a challenge because you're seeing businesses and others out there who are fully on board with being sustainable and having that roadmap to become net zero. There's others who have yet to be convinced, and indeed there's others that maybe don't want to be convinced. So as a relationship banker, it's been able to articulate to all those types of individuals the journey that they really should be on, because it's a subject matter and a topic that, quite simply, why would you not want to do your bit for the planet or society, whether you're on board with it or not. And looking across various sectors, looking across various businesses, there's, as I said, there's some businesses that are miles ahead doing. They've got a deep green strategies within the bones of the organisation. And that's not just large corporates. You're starting to see businesses buy into this and adapt how they're dealing with sustainability into that smaller SME market and beneath that into the business banking space. So from an ethical point of view, from a responsible banker point of view, it's been able to help and assist these types of businesses and articulate to them what good looks like, what others are doing, because ultimately it's not going to go away. So if you can share that type of best practice, share that type of experience, and highlight to them the challenges that not adopting a sustainable strategy may have, how that could hinder them in their business going forward, because ultimately, whether it's the Royal Bank or NatWest Group, or whether it's any bank across the globe, this is a growing area of focus that a business or an individual is going to start to have to articulate what journey they are on, but not only to somebody like myself or a bank, but they're going to need to articulate it to their insurance companies, their supply chain, their customer base. So it's all the stakeholders that are going to be looking at this type of thing. So as a banker, you have to be on board and help that customer get on board that journey as quick as they possibly can. And I suppose, having sat the exam, it's been fantastic because it's such a massive subject matter that if you want to be truly understanding and have that ethical point of view, you owe it to yourself to go and find out as much as you can on the topic. And having sat the exam with the Institute, what that's done quite simply is give somebody like myself and others that deeper understanding of sustainability and what that means to help the customers on that journey. There's no point asking a question at a high level. The customer gives you some feedback or asks a follow-on question, and then as the point of contact, you then don't know what to say next. So with COP being in Glasgow, being a topic of conversation, with having done the exam with the Institute, it's just giving somebody like myself, from an ethical point of view, that deeper understanding to help customers and businesses on that journey as they adapt to a sustainable future.
Yeah, it's really interesting because obviously a lot of banks are taking ethical standpoints around about climate and making some real sort of assertions about what they want to see and what they want to do as businesses. So that really helps, because it helps you position that and let people know. So yeah, really good and well done on getting another string to your bow there, Alex. I think that's fantastic.
Thanks.
And just following up on Alex's answer, Ed, can you explain the approach or the current approach to sustainability in Southeast Asia? I mean, obviously based on your experiences and perspective, do you feel there are noticeable differences?
Yeah, I mean, I actually want to use the roadmap that Alex was explaining at the same time. They yet to be convinced, a word maybe to describe the Southeast Asian region, because where I'm coming from, I came from the Philippines, and I'm lucky to have been trained in a bank in Malaysia. The status of the region is more of building their roadmap for sustainability. Only few are, I would say, convinced, and they are the one leading the sustainability change in Southeast Asia. While there are still the customer side from the banking end that still are yet to be, which are, I would say, majority. But I guess it is a growing phase in the region, and it's a collaborative effort between the commercial side and the regulatory side. So a good example is in the Philippines. One of the things that we are driving is digital banking. So these digital banks and the regulators are crafting their own regulation for the digital banking segment, and that is purposely made towards financial inclusion, because one big factor in the Philippines, like 60 to 70% of our population is underserved. So that's one of the priority key factors. On the other side, Malaysia, they are more onto execution already of some policies that they have built. And a great issue in Southeast Asia would be this palm oil industry, which affects a lot of our products. And how I see it is that to enable the small farmers of palm oil to become more sustainable, the financial institutions are this key enabler or driver of sustainability, because the common denominator is that we all flows in the financing system, and once the financial institutions structure their sustainability drive, it sort of either pushes or advances the customer side to the sustainability portion.
So Ed, thinking about just what you said, so we're in a situation in Southeast Asia and in the rest of the world where we might be closer to it than in some areas than other areas, but generally we're not quite there yet in terms of making really good, solid, ethical decisions around about climate. So for people on the front line, what would you be saying to them to help them make decisions, or at least support their leaders in bringing to light some ethical challenges around climate so that they can support the whole?
I think the main thing that I would say, or even what they would need to think about, is really bank for the future. Look into deals transaction that does not just affect your current requirements or your current KPI, but really what do you look forward on on banking, and how do you want to, for example, retire, or how your kids be affected by this whole ecosystem and that's happening, not just in Southeast Asia, but also worldwide. And a while ago, you asked me about the noticeable differences. I think I would say we are thankful to have our European counterparts to advance on this journey where we learn and how to apply it. And now we pinpoint certain priority factors that we wanted to solve in our region.
Great, thanks for that, Ed. And thanks for, we just had a message from one of our attendees talking about sound quality. So we will make an effort as speakers just to speak up a little bit and make sure that we speak properly into the microphones. Okay, so thank you for that. Brilliant, thanks Ed, really good comments there. I really like that there's a lot that can be learned from both regions to each other, I think, and support. And the closer we all get as a world on this type of topic will allow us all to make great ethical decisions around about climate. So thank you for that. Karen, a question for you. Can you tell us more about the sales culture and how this relates to ethical decision making and the changes that have occurred and challenges facing the banking sector?
Yes, I think that the sales culture has evolved significantly and more so over the last number of years. Banks, financial advisors and other regulated professionals have a duty to provide products which are suitable for their customers and financial needs. And I think it's fair to say that there are high press stories whereby that's not always happened consistently. Where can this go wrong with sales? So we know that there is potential self-interest of an advisor should they be on the wrong compensation scheme or an organisation because they're going to potentially make more money. There's an opportunity potentially of failure where the advisors failed to properly understand a customer's needs. And actually, again, failure number 3 is to failure of properly explaining the product, the risk or the benefits. But there's a lot been done, as I said, and there's a lot been done where banks have been able to do that, and they continually improve that by listening to their customers and working closely with the regulators. The first thing is actually part of the Chartered Banker, which is about professionalising bankers. We've started to see that across many of our financial institutions whereby bankers have been got professional qualifications. Alex talking about his in green finance. We've started to better understand our product, and our product knowledge has significantly improved. So we understand our products and therefore able to have better conversations with our customers. Number 2 is around deeper awareness of our customers. Now, I'm no expert in artificial intelligence, but I do know that that really helps us understand our customers' behaviours and what it is that they need. I know at wholesale level that we've really started to understand vulnerabilities of our customers, and for those new into role that haven't had experience of living or working with vulnerable customers, we've really invested, I think, in understanding what vulnerability means and how we can support those as financial institutions. We have number 3 is about improved support for our leaders. I think every financial institution I have worked with and certainly been part of this has really worked with their leaders to improve their capability to be able to support their sales journey, whether that be through coaching or whether that be through good sales leadership. Number 4 is about promotion of diversity and inclusion across the workplace. So if we think about how we make ethical decisions, if we go to the same type of people that we work with every single day, we're going to get the same answer. And the best way to get a change, going back to my curiosity point, is actually if we have a diverse somebody from a different background to us or a diverse way of thinking is going to get us a better ethical outcome from any decision that we make. Number 5 is this. Oh, sorry, Nick. Sorry, I've got 10.
No, I was just going to say, Karen, I think that's so important because that point that you raised is that we know that the broader the diversity of a group, then the more options will be brought up, the more opportunities to get different outcomes and therefore improve on our answers overall. So I think it's a hugely important point to helping us make great ethical decisions.
Yeah, agree. Number 5 is about the senior manager regime, and we've got senior people having more accountability for those they manage, so actually holding the senior managers to account for those people that they manage, and that's a shift. Number 6 is developing financial awareness of customers. So many of our financial institutions are actually raising the capability of our customers to help them make better decisions as part of that sales process. And actually, we recognise that actually people just don't feel comfortable in having good financial conversations. So by raising the capability and awareness of our customers, we're actually helping them make better decisions. So first of all, an ethical decision of an organisation to do that, but equally helping customers to challenge us when we're not necessarily behaving in the way that they would expect us to. Pardon me. Number 7 is a shift in how organisations celebrate role models in behaviour, both in business decisions and in individual actions. So leadership, as we talked about at the start, is for all. And actually, if you're building a product or in the marketing team, it's about how you're making those business decisions and how ethical they are towards our customers. And then individual actions in terms of how they actually talk to the customers and then how they execute that sale. Number 8 is an evolution of compensation and the promotion process to ensure reflection of desired behaviours, including consequences, weak management oversight, and I love this phrase, or willfulness of blindness. And so that is just ignoring and turning your head away of when you've seen poor behaviours. Number 9 is a change in organisational design and governance structure. So this is about the role of the middle managers in playing cultural reform and promoting through lower levels of the organisation. And number 10, and possibly arguably the most important, is the promotion of an environment of creating psychological safety. So encourage colleagues to speak up, escalate issues without fear, bullying or aggressive management style. Now, all of those combined is a shift in how we've started to operate as financial institutions across globally, not just in the UK, but globally. And we're starting to see the impact that that is having on the sales process, that customers are having better conversations, we are better equipped as organisations, and we're responding to our customer needs.
Yeah, fantastic, Karen. Thank you for that. And I recognise so many of those. And I think, for some of us that have been around a little bit longer, we recognise some of the challenges that maybe, brought those conditions, those realities around. But understanding customers' needs, I just love. I think that's the absolute way forward. And just, the education on all sides. But your final point there about the psychological safety and making a workplace environment conducive to doing the right things, I think is so important. So, and that's where we should be helping and supporting as many people as we can. Fantastic, thank you. Okay, so back to some general questions that we've had in, and can you all how can all staff and banks get better at seeing the ethical dilemma that's in front of them? I was going to ask Ed that question. How can all staff see this ethical dilemma?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I think training, where I came from, would be like one driver to help staff see ethical dilemmas, right? A while ago, we shared how we describe or how ethical decision making means to us, and I guess that training, that thoughtful process, and having that curiosity ingrained to each of the staff when dealing in transactions would be one of the key drivers to see this ethical dilemma. A great example is when I just started in my career, I just follow the steps, what to do on certain transactions, but really every transaction is different and requires a certain process, how you would decide and what are the factors that you have to weigh. And for me, again, I'm going back to the framework that I've learned in my MBA, is that, consider like the legality, economics, and ethics part of it, and weigh how you could deliver it to serve your customers better. And yeah, so I guess it's really training on that thoughtful process for our staffs.
Fantastic, and from an organisational perspective, absolutely, that's key. And maybe Alex, if you could talk to us a little bit about how all staff in banks can get better at seeing the ethical dilemma. Obviously, we've heard Ed talking about the teaching part. Is there any other parts that you've seen that necessarily around how do you, as an individual, that's maybe not a leader, somebody working, how do you get better at seeing the ethical dilemmas in front of you?
Yeah, probably a key for me, and I don't want to steal the thunder for any future points that get made on this call, but two things for me. One is discussing it with peers, discussing it with your team, discussing it with your management before you make a call on something. But it all boils down to me, and it's based on the experience you have. If you've got expertise in an area, you're better placed to make a decision. But again, discussing it, building a culture internally to have those types of discussion openly before landing on a decision is probably the key for me. And I've got a few live ethical decisions that I need to make for various situations as we speak this week, coincidentally. And again, how I'm managing that, even though I think I know how to manage it, is by seeking counsel from the appropriate people in the bank who have been there and lived it before.
Great answer, Alex. And I think it's really, really important that you do seek counsel and get support. And some places around the world will make decisions differently. We don't all make them the same. So I think that's really important shout out just to make sure, because the one thing that we should always do is have a good quality discussion around those topics. Karen, what are the factors that stop people from making ethical decisions?
I think the first one is, in the world that we live in today, the pace that we're working at. And sometimes we just don't get the time to talk about what Ed and Alex has just talked about. If I think about when I've potentially made less good decisions, ethical decisions, it's because I've been put under pressure and the pace that I need to make a decision at. So I think the first thing to call out is pace. The second thing is just that, again, just to reiterate, that lack of awareness and a lack of being sensitized, for want of a better word, to actually what it is, the problem, and just not having the opportunity to properly identify the problem, to be able to actually make the right decision and actually explore the right decision to be able to come up with a good ethical outcome.
Fantastic. And same question to you, Ed, in terms of what do you see as the factors that stop people from making ethical decisions?
I totally agree with Karen. It's really about that awareness on and considering the pace of it, right? We need to act fast because time is money in banking. But I think one of the factor that I could share is also personal lifestyle, because sometimes as a middle manager, or sometimes even as an employee of whatever ranks, if you are on different lavish indebted lifestyle, for example, you have no choice but to do what is in front of you. And the savings, is not just for the future, but it's also your fallback if you are faced with potential fraudulent or unethical decision. You could always take a step back. That's how I would interpret that, challenges in the ethical decisions when you're faced with.
Excellent, thank you. And Alex, same question to you, just to get a slightly different perspective. What do you see as the factors that stop people from making ethical decisions?
I absolutely echo what both Ed and Karen have said there. And certainly in banking, again, across the globe, you've seen mistakes get made in the past when unethical decisions have been made, and it's purely for selfish gain, potentially. And again, the pace aspect is a key one, because as organisations contract, the staff do that little bit more, and some teams are under a little bit more pressure to achieve what they need to achieve. But as we would say in the west coast of Scotland, a kind of foot in the ball moment. Let's just take a breather, a pause, think about it. But the key things are pace and probably lessons learned from the past when it was potentially for selfish gain, I would say, which is now massively, the way things are done now could not be further from the way they were done, a decade or two ago. It's night and day.
Yeah, really good point, Alex. And the key part for me is just remembering that we have made so much progress as an industry, but we can still do more. And some of it's down to leadership practices, some of it's down to pressure being applied, or things, as Karen says, you're just under that constant pace of having to make decisions. So it's about how do we actually do just what you say, take that moment, because it's actually important to do it. It's important just to take the moment, gather all the information and make the right decisions. So putting a foot on the ball, as you said, analogy-wise, is a good way of putting it. That's great. So next, we've got a couple of questions left before we move on to the question and answers. And we've had a few of those coming in. I haven't looked at them quite yet, but I'll get to them. But a couple of quick comments we've had from Michael Birmingham. A US justice described ethics as knowing the difference between what you have a right to do and the right thing to do. I think that's an interesting viewpoint, one worth thinking about. And Gary Miko has also said, I would suggest one of the important foundation of ethical decision-making is having a sound value system. Your ethical decision-making will be strong if you and your business have a sound value system. I really like that, Gary. And certainly I've seen in the banks that I deal with a real resurgence in things like vision, things like mission, things like purpose, really developing those out. And I say that across the world, not just in the UK and company I used to work for, but I think it's certainly something that is become more and more prominent. So it's a really, really good shout. And I think as individuals developing our own value system, or at least trying to understand it, can be a great way for us on the front lines to help and develop our own way of making ethical decisions. Great stuff.
Yeah. If I could share a little, I totally agree as well on what Gary posted. I remembered values just being posted in the wall of the bank or the branch, but it's really how you implement, you put in or ingrain the corporate or the values that the company has to your employees. That's the real challenge, and matching the values of the company with, of course, the personal values where the employees are also coming from, because everybody had like a different experience in the past that build their personality.
Yeah, Ed, and I think that's where we get into the real point about cultural change, isn't it? Where we implement a great value system within a company that develops cultural change and allows people. And I think this is where the businesses, the banks that do it best will really create that link between the behaviours that they expect and actually the values of the people that do the behaviours. So really tie those links together. And I think that's a great way of bringing success to that. So yeah, really important point. So thank you for that. Slightly off our questions, Gary, but I thought it was a really good point just to mention. So appreciate that. Okay, so when thinking about, and Karen, I'll come back to you on this one, how important is collaboration within the decision-making process? Now, Alex touched on this briefly. What's your thoughts on that?
Collaboration is really important to actually understand what the root cause of the decision, or what the root of the decision is that you're trying to make, and to get the right expertise. So I might be ultimately accountable for making a decision, but I may not have the right expertise to make that decision. So working collaboratively with people to help me get that decision, to help me make that right decision is absolutely critical. And it goes back to my curiosity point. So my role, if I'm not the expert, is to be curious, to make sure I understand it and fully understand it, and bring in the right people to work collaboratively to be able to do that. The other point is about working with professional bodies. To Ed's first point in order to professionalise the bankers that we have, and then also with the external regulators. So actually working with the external regulators very much in partnership, and I think it feels for me that that partnership has shifted between the regulators and the banks, and it feels more harmonious now than it did probably historically, in order to work to make sure that actually we're making the right decisions for today and again in the future. So I think working collaboratively with a number of bodies is really, really important.
Excellent, thank you. And Ed, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think maybe to add on what Karen already said is that being a middle manager, for example, in a bank, I know that I'm not left behind in the decision that I would make, because it is a shared value. It is a shared decision created by the team. That's why I really believe that, you know, the collaboration between this ethical decision-making process is really important, because we move towards from, you know, protecting our own behind versus to how can we solve a problem knowing that we're not alone in the system.
Excellent. And last word on this one, Alex, around about that collaboration. You kind of kicked off the point earlier around about this.
Yeah, I mean, for me, sometimes you see, you know, people new into organisations, the word collaboration is bandied about quite a lot, and a lot of people think it's just about going to get to know some people in other departments in an organisation, but true collaboration in any decision is about sharing best practice. It's about getting to know the experts that are either external and or in-house, that can allow you to arrive at the right decision for the customer and the organisation you work for. But as Ed says there as well, it's all about sharing best practice, sharing experiences to get to the right answer at the end of the day. Doing the right thing. It's back to my opening point. It's about doing the right thing, and the more you can, the more people you can speak to before you arrive at that decision, then ultimately you're going to arrive at the right decision and do the right thing for the customer.
So again, as somebody, a non-leader within an organisation, actually developing out your network within the organisation and potentially externally is so important to helping you in all those. I think we've got nods all round for that. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. I really appreciate the question and answers so far. We have got some other comments, which I'm going to talk through in a moment. So if there are any other questions and answers that people would like to share, just please do so now under the Q&A box. All of the resources for the Leadership for All series will be available through the hub. So that's the Chartered Banker Institute Knowledge Hub. You can access them there. Obviously, you know, keep a close lookout on LinkedIn as well for the future sessions that we're running on the various topics. We've touched on a couple of them around about AI and around about climate, and also vulnerable customers as well. So we've got some great panel webcasts coming up on those three subjects in the near future. Right, so we're now just going to move across to the question and answers, see what has been sent in. Please keep sending anything in if you would like, if there's unanswered points. First one, we've got an anonymous attendee, terrific insights around the role of the banker in supporting clients to go green. Loved Alex's insights earlier, enjoying the conversation. Thank you very much, Mr. or Ms. Anonymous. And we also have another one. What advice would you give someone working in the sector who wants to implement positive change? We'll maybe start with that point before we go on to the rest of the question. Positive change. I'll come to Karen.
This again goes back to my starting point around choice. So anyone has a choice to challenge, and if you're working in an environment that is psychologically safe, then actually you have that opportunity to start a change and have an opportunity to start change on an individual basis, depending on where you are in the organisation, and actually if you feel comfortable, it's about actually what is your idea, what is your challenge, what is it that you would like to see. And I think we talked about earlier, putting yourself into the shoes of the customer, of your colleagues, and actually even just as part of a community that you're working. And if you want to change something, then just have a conversation with your senior leaders, because I know that they would be up for that change.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex, any thoughts on that?
No, absolutely spot on. I mean, the tone should be set from the top down, but if that's not happening, as Karen says, you set the example, you set the culture, you set the tone yourself. There's nothing stopping you.
And Ed?
Perhaps if I would add on this one, I would say it depends on the organization whether it's easy or hard to really implement positive change. But I guess strategically, you need to look into the people that you want to have that buy-in, and perhaps to get that buy-in on the positive change that you wanted to have, understand how the system works. I mean, system, not the system of politics, etc., but how each and everyone's key performance, for example, work into, and how that change would impact their business. And by having that kind of discussion and how the positive change would actually impact them more or even better, I guess you would essentially get the buy-in and start or implement that change, or as a starting point, implement that change in the organization.
Excellent. And Alex, again, just back to you on this one, and I'll move on to the next question, but advice on how to raise ideas with leaders or senior managers in organizations. How would you advise our questioner on that?
Yeah, so for me, I mean, having having recently sat the Green and Sustainable Finance exam and within the organisation I work for, I put myself forward for that. I wasn't asked, I volunteered. So if you volunteer for things like that, if you volunteer for, you call it a champion role within your local team, that could then branch out into other parts of the organisation. If you truly believe on a subject matter or a topic passionately, then take ownership of it and become the champion locally to fly the flag. And that should, in theory and in turn, raise your profile within your organisation. But, grasp the opportunity if you feel passionate about something and become the local go-to person, the local expert on that, and that will lead on to other things.
Yeah, I totally echo that. I think understanding what it is you want to do and almost go through that ethical decision making yourself process to make sure that you know what you're talking about and that you're comfortable in sharing it and going to those leaders for the positive change, because I think that's so important. So thanks for that, Alex, and thanks for that question. That was really good. George has messaged in saying, how do you comment on ethical decision making and the trade-off between bank shareholders, bank profits, customer protection, customer satisfaction, and the need for green finance and successfully manage the climate finance risk? And George, a really good question, and I think a lot of people will have asked the question: what happens when it comes down to the pounds and pence or the dollars when it comes to making a decision around green finance and ethics, and where would the stakeholders make a choice as to where would the purpose be? And it's a difficult one, I know. And Ed, I'm going to come to you first on that one. How do you see that? And do you see, have you heard or come across businesses or banks, that are making a go of this, or are able to overcome the stakeholder kind of profits versus not funding non-green assets?
Yeah, this is a totally difficult question, because we are used to this concept of future cash flow, right? So when we make decision, everything should be valued monetary terms. But when it comes to sustainability, there's a lot of gray area that is not yet valued by, I would say, mathematics. But I guess it coming from the same concept, what are the future benefits that would this transaction, for example, work for the organization? I think from the bank in Malaysia that I experienced, they look at that always. That's why their tagline at the moment is banking for the future. So they really look into other factors in the that would affect the systems in the future beyond profit, because end of the day there's still that value that would eventually affect profitability, right? And at the moment I would say that it's hard, but having said that, accounting for the future change, I think I hope I answered the question of our attendee, but yeah, to make that ethical decision choice or help make that decision process happen is really for account to that future impact, not just for your current status as a bank.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. This is a process. We can't change overnight to now say we cannot do something. As much as we need to, we do need some positive movement on the subject, though, and we need to start considering all of these different aspects for the benefit of all, because there are still large industries out there that we need to maybe pare back on, but they need to show their development as well. It's not all about what we do, but also we can't stop funding them immediately, because that could affect people's lives and livelihoods. And I think so. There's got to be a real balanced, positive approach to this, all moving together in the right direction. That collaboration, I think, is key. To Karen, question to you, to those organizations, this is from Dion, to those organizations which are mainly target driven, what advice would you give to avoid ethical decision-making dilemmas?
This is a really hot topic at the moment. Alex is smiling too, and this gives organizations the opportunity to really understand how they manage performance and how they reward performance with the compensation. So first of all, I think there's an opportunity to revolutionise how performance management is done, particularly in banks, and then how people are rewarded on the back of that to actually stop that. And I think organisations need to be brave, and there are some organisations out there doing it already and think differently. So actually it does encourage the right decision making. I think it goes into the evolution of the next phase that we need to go through in terms of ethical decision making and what needs to happen next. But my tip is really to really challenge your targets. Are they driving what the purpose of the organisation is, and therefore the ethical stance that it's taking as an organisation, and do the behaviours really drive that, and do people manage against behaviours? Ed talked about the behaviours and the values previously, but actually if many organisations are just focusing on the actual targets rather than the behaviours, then we're never going to get the right ethical decision making as well. Yeah. So be brave, challenge it. Yeah, absolutely. Really, really important. I'm just going to go on to the final question we've got time for at the moment, and it's an anonymous one. But it's actually probably needs a little bit longer than time we have, so if we don't get round to answering it all, we will try later. But given decisions are made in the context of the industry that people work in, do we need to first confirm that banking and financial industry are ethical? I'll probably stick on that point for now. Alex, what are your thoughts? I mean, my thoughts initially are, it's probably, we're like everybody else, we're an evolution towards ethical, and it's all about learning and development and enhancing great collaboration with our regulatory and legal bodies that we work with. What are your thoughts on that, Alex?
I think I think people are right to challenge organisations like banks, in terms of their values and who they're funding. But ultimately, it boils down to if an institution, as you mentioned earlier, Nick, has a purpose that stands alongside, a journey to net zero, sustainability, etc., then it really boils down to you as the individual. You need to hold your nerve and, again, just do things right. Do things right for your customer. and that is what will win the battle at the end of the day. You know, it's playing the long game, holding their nerve. You know, everybody wants to earn their wage. Everybody would love a bonus, but that shouldn't be, in this day and age, the primary driver. You have to do things right by the customer, and all these other things will naturally fall into place. And that's what I've done throughout my career. Delivered on customer service, delivered on what the customer expectations are, and everything else should just naturally happen off the back of that without going out chasing something. If that answers it.
Yeah, it does. No, and thanks. I'm just going to come to the final word on this one from Ed, and then we're going to close up. Ed, what are your thoughts on that one? You know, obviously you're doing a lot of work at Harvard at the moment, working with the Asia School of Business. What's your thoughts on banking and financial industries and ethical?
Yeah, maybe just to share, I guess it's quite a difficult question, but I guess I would relate it to what's currently happening in the industry, where there's this great resignation that is coming from employees moving out from their current companies, and then it's like a reinforcing cycle that companies would now hire for a bigger salaries. And I guess one of the factors, aside from the whole being burned out on your current work, is that, you know, that shared value is not integrated. And I would love to find, you know, a company that I could work with and collaborate with what I believe in, for example. So I don't know how to answer this question. I would say, I guess, first confirm that banking and the financial industry is ethical. I think it depends on how the organization work and how they tie in their values to their employees. Plus, you yourself, if you can actually integrate your values to your company. I guess that's how I would interpret this question.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for that. And I'm just going to, just given the time, it's 12:57 now, so I'm going to bring the session to a close. So look, thanks for everybody. Thanks to our panelists. You've been fantastic, Ed, Karen and Alex. We really appreciate it. Your insights, your thoughts today, really thought-provoking, and certainly from the comments we've had from our guests, that's come through. And also just a quick thanks to Emma O'Sullivan, who's behind the scenes been organising all of this for us and working the webinar today to help us focus on the questions. So thank you to Emma as well. And to thank you to all of you who have joined in and listened. And the questions, you know, we've got some outstanding questions from George, from Anthony, from Mohammed. We will answer those, and we will come back to you on those. But I really appreciate you sending those in. I'm sorry we didn't quite have time to answer them to the three of you, so thank you for that. Okay, so we hope you enjoyed this, and as I said, feel free to contact us if you have any further questions or following up on this, anything you think about later on that you'd like to ask. I'd just like to say thanks to everybody. Good afternoon, and hopefully you'll be able to join us for the following series, or the completion of the series of webcasts in the near future. So thank you all very much, and have a great afternoon.